8 Ruthless Female Gangsters. At the age of 21, San Clemente was crowned as Colombia's Queen of Coffee in a pageant. Afterwards, she reportedly spent 8 years in Mexico before moving to Buenos Aires with her Argentinian boyfriend, Nicolas Gualco. San Clemente's fall began in 2009 after another model was arrested while attempting to board a flight from Argentina to Cancun, Mexico, with suitcases stuffed with around 55 kilograms of cocaine. Police claimed San Clemente had been responsible for recruiting young female drug mules to smuggle drugs into Europe. Known as the Flamingo, as well as Queen of the Gangster Malls, Hill became notorious as the girlfriend of Brooklyn mobster Bugsy Siegel. She came from a poor background, telling people she didn't own a pair of shoes until age 17. Born in Alabama and raised in Georgia, she moved to Chicago to seek fame and fortune. She found a bit of both, working as an accountant for Al Capone. Evelyn Frechette was well connected. Frechette was well known for being John Dillinger's devoted girlfriend and pretty much rose to infamy with him. Frechette came from an unexpected background for a gun moll. A child of French and Native American descent through the Menominee tribe, she attended Catholic grade school, then went on to graduate from high school. Even with an education, finding work was difficult, which led Frechette to Chicago. After her first husband was jailed for a post office robbery, Frechette met Dillinger and traveled with him through a cross-country crime spree. The pair survived several shootouts. Pearl Elliott was a notorious madam who owned a brothel in Kokomo, Indiana. Famously known as an associate of Prohibition-era gangster Harry Pierpont and bank robber John Dillinger, Elliott was very much her own woman and no gun moll. She was famously described as vicious and dangerous by J. Edgar Hoover, which some say was a cover for the FBI having killed a woman in the shootout. She reportedly harbored bank robbers, including Pierpont, after the robbery of the Southside State Bank in Kokomo in 1925. And there are numerous reports of her harboring other criminals in various establishments, including Dillinger. She repeatedly evaded police and even spent several weeks with Dillinger hiding out in a basement in Chicago. On July 25, 1934, Elliott was reportedly seen in Mooresville, Indiana, at Dillinger's funeral, where she was quoted as saying, "I came here for a last look at Johnny. He never threw me down, and I wouldn't do it on him." Unlike many others, Elliott didn't die in a police shootout, but quietly at her mother's home in Florida at the age of 47. If there was a true godmother of crime, then Arizona Donnie Barker was it. Also known as Kate Barker and Ma Barker, history has not been kind to this merciless matriarch. Marrying George Baker when she was 19 years old, the couple had 4 sons. The family unit, Arizona, George, and sons Herman, Lloyd, Arthur, and Fred, operated as a sophisticated crime family, pulling off highway robberies from as early as 1910. Ma Barker and the Barker Gang earned notoriety during the Public Enemy era, when the activities of criminal gangs sparked the public's imagination. The family committed a series of heists and murders, but it wasn't long until time ran out for the Barkers. In 1927, Herman committed suicide to avoid arrest, and soon after, her 3 remaining sons were all jailed. When Fred was released in 1931, mother and son embarked on a new crime spree, which was to end in disaster. The pair was killed 4 years later after the FBI stormed their hideout in Lake Ware, Florida. Despite being ordered to surrender, Fred opened fire, and both died after an intense, hours-long shootout. After her death, she was known as a ruthless crime boss who controlled and organized the Barker Gang's criminal activities, although people close to her insisted she had no role whatsoever in her son's crimes. Perhaps more of an accomplice than an out-and-out gangster, Helen Gillis was the wife of Lester Gillis, otherwise known as Babyface Nelson because of his youthful appearance. Born Helen Warziniak, she married Nelson when she was just 16 years old. By age 20, she had 2 children, and Gillis was on the government's shoot-to-kill list for her role in assisting in her husband's crimes. Nelson had a long history of robbery and murder. He was associated with the infamous gangster John Dillinger and killed several people during his criminal career, including 3 FBI agents. After Nelson escaped the FBI at the Little Bohemia Lodge in April of 1934, Gillis was convicted on harboring charges and paroled. She was then with Nelson and fellow criminal John Paul Chase a few months later in Illinois on November 27, 1934, when Nelson, ever keen to take in revenge on police, spotted a police car and, together with Gillis and Chase, chased it down with guns blazing. Nelson was wounded more than a dozen times during the ensuing police shootout, later known as the Battle of Barrington. Gillis and Nelson escaped to a safe house on Walnut Street in Wilmette, where Nelson died in bed with his wife. Gillis finally surrendered to police on Thanksgiving Day and testified against Chase, who received life in prison. She died some 50 years later and was buried next to her husband in Chicago's St. Joseph's Cemetery. Stephanie St. Clair was effectively a mob boss in her native Harlem, running numerous criminal enterprises as an independent contractor in a world dominated by men. Known as Madame St. Clair, she was an immigrant of French-African descent who ran a successful underground numbers game, which netted her a small fortune. St. Clair resisted the efforts of the mafia to muscle in on her territory and testified against crooked cops. With her chief enforcer, Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson, and Lucky Luciano, St. Clair was able to keep the mafia out of Harlem. They refused to pay protection money to mob boss Dutch Schultz and instead attacked his storefronts and tipped off police to his activities. Shortly after, she handed over the reins of the business to Bumpy Johnson, who was later known as the Harlem Godfather. But she never forgot Schultz. When she heard he was dying, she famously sent him a telegram saying, quote, "As ye sow, so shall ye reap." In 1938, she was charged and found guilty of shooting her husband, Sufi Abdul Hamid, and spent 10 years in the New York State Prison for Women at Belford. She died, still a rich woman, in Harlem in the 1960s. Bonnie Parker no doubt goes down in history as one of the most famous American gangsters. Along with partner in crime Clyde Barrow, the pair earned celebrity status as notorious bank robbers between 1931 and 1934. Born in Rowena, Texas, Parker was a strong, smart woman with a reputation for outspokenness. Although she was already married when she met Clyde in 1930, the two fell for each other and soon embarked on robbing and killing sprees. Together, they're believed to have been responsible for more than 100 crimes and are believed to have killed at least 9 police officers and several civilians. They conducted at least a dozen bank robberies, for which they were made famous, but also robbed small stores and gas stations. However, their lives of crime and passion were short-lived, with both of them killed in a police shootout in Bienville Parish, Louisiana in 1934. Parker was just 23 years old, and Clyde was 25. They made a good-looking couple, and their exploits appealed to the public, despite their 2-year crime spree. Iconic images of them taken in their hideout near Joplin, Missouri have ignited popular imagination for decades, and the legend of Bonnie and Clyde has inspired many films, books, and TV series over the years. Most famously in Arthur Penn's 1967 Oscar-winning biopic, Bonnie and Clyde. Parker was portrayed by Faye Dunaway, and Clyde was played by Warren Beatty. However, the legend endures, and she was most recently brought to life on screen by Holliday Grainger in the 2013 miniseries Bonnie and Clyde.